Thank the maker. Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker is finally here, and there's so much to unpack, debate, discuss, argue about. Did J.J. Abrams stick the landing, or did he blow it worse than Porkins? Too soon. R.I.P. Porkins. Joining me today on the Jedi Council, but not granted the rank of Master, is our resident cinephile, Nick Limon.
It's not fair! You treat me like a disobedient child! Sorry, hi guys.
Cool, and also we have our editorial expert and all-around nice guy, David. Hey David, quick question. Do you want to be a Jedi Master? We have an opening.
It seems like a risky job nowadays. I don't know if I want to take the position. I'll say just regular Jedi. I don't want to be the Master title. It just draws too much attention to you. Yeah, I'll just be regular Jedi.
Sounds good. All jokes aside, here is your official spoiler warning. If you don't want to hear any Rise of Skywalker spoilers, now is the time to make like Boba Fett and disappear inside a Sarlacc for like 1,000 years, because that's all we're about to do right now. First off, gentlemen, thumbs up or thumbs down for Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. Did this work for you? Did it not work for you? Nick, what do you think?
Thumbs way down for me. It did
tough.
not work for me on any level. I did get some enjoyment out of just the Star Wars fanboy in me and finally being in that world once again. But I think on a critical level, I think the story just fails at every possible turn.
This didn't work for you. David, how about you?
I'm going to give it a thumbs up. I was very entertained. I had a smile throughout most of the movie. There were a few things, especially with the new characters, like with Zouri and Jana. I'm like, I just didn't feel connected to these characters. Why are they here? They look cool, but I don't really care about them. But overall, I enjoyed the action and adventure aspects of it. I think JJ put on a spectacle, which is what I wanted to see in a big blockbuster movie like this one.
You know, guys, I liked it. I found it generally enjoyable. These things aren't perfect, and this one is far from perfect as well. I think it's the least impressive third trilogy film in the saga. But in this one, I think the way the movie dealt with a lot of the gripes that people had with The Last Jedi definitely took me out of the narrative in a lot of different places. And that serves as a perfect segue to my next question. Do you feel like The Rise of Skywalker was created to be a direct response with some of the criticism that Lucasfilm faced after The Last Jedi?
I think it was totally designed in a way to retcon all of the things people did not like from The Last Jedi, straight from Rey's parentage, I should say, her lineage. Palpatine kind of being worked in, making it so that this is truly about the Skywalker family and only about the Skywalker family.
And so, David, did that work for you? How did you feel about that?
Yes and no. I kind of agree with what Nick's saying, but I don't think it's totally trying to retcon everything that he did, because I like the fact they did acknowledge some of the stuff that happened in Last Jedi. For instance, the Holdo maneuver. I can't say that 3 times fast. The maneuver where she goes through the Star Destroyers and just blows up all the ships in the system, makes a crack through them. Like, really cool scene, right?
But it's almost written off in a way like, well, that could never happen again. It was a 1 in 90 million chance that you can do something like that.
However,
they
hold on. They did acknowledge the Holdo maneuver,
yes.
But this actually goes to the folks watching. When you see the film, watch at the end. I do believe that the Holdo maneuver is shown in the very end of the movie, where other systems are using that to fight the First Order.
Oh, that's right.
I think so. When you see Bespin and you see Endor, I think it's not written off, because it's used again later in the movie. But that's a different thing. You guys let us know what you see about that.
Did they just contradict themselves in their own movie then? It's a 1 in 1 million thing that can happen, and yet it happens again in the movie.
They may have. And you know what? There's a whole laundry list of different aspects or different elements of this movie that seem to be directly responding to The Last Jedi criticism, and we'll go down that list one by one as we go. But real quick before we do, in general, I wanted to ask you, is fan service important? Did Lucasfilm need to address what happened with The Last Jedi? Is that something that needed to happen?
I think fan service is an important part of creating and developing any franchise. I mean, you look at anime, just to call something out specifically known for fan service, but it can't be so obtrusive that it just slaps you in the face with like, hey, you like this? You like this? You're liking this, right? And I think that's the problem I had with this film as a whole. It felt like J.J. Abrams wanted to choke you out with the blanket and comfort of nostalgia. And I think that the story was beholden to nostalgia and fan service. And that's a problem when it's a crutch, I should say.
What do you think, David?
Well, I think what JJ did so well with The Force Awakens is that he kind of steered the ship in the right direction. You got the ship back on track. And then Rian Johnson comes in and handles Last Jedi and shakes it up a little bit. Yeah, like I said, I think he shakes it up a little bit. He kind of goes a little more adult, which was interesting. And then JJ kind of brings it back here, which I'll be honest, it is a little jarring at times because it just feels so different than what Rian Johnson in Last Jedi. But I thought that the spirit, as corny as it is to say, of Star Wars was still there. The funness of it, the family adventure saga that everybody can enjoy. That's what JJ was trying to do with The Force Awakens. It's a shame that he couldn't carry it all the way through, but I still thought he accomplished that for the most part with Rise of Skywalker.
In terms of tone, in terms of the feel of the movie, I would agree with you. It definitely did have that Star Wars feel, but at the same time, I acknowledge what you're saying, Nick. That fan service, that almost pandering nature of it, definitely pulled me out of the narrative.
It felt regressive to me. Like I had grown up a little bit, and then suddenly I'm back in childhood again.
Whatever you think about The Last Jedi, whether you like it, you hate it, the thing that I'm a little frustrated with is still, at this point, in 2019, the conversation is still about The Last Jedi and not really about the Rise of Skywalker.
Ooh, yeah, that's a problem.
But I digress. We will get to that in just a second. So we're going to go down a list right now of elements that I suspect may have been written that may have been written to address those criticisms directly. I'm going to go down that list. We're going to kind of bandy about. Let me know what you think. So, firstly, Rey is now a Palpatine. Rey's parents were nobodies, but there was more information. There was more to that story. Kylo Ren pulled the classic retcon move by just simply adding on to the story. Did this work for you?
No, not in the least. The idea that he retconned it so simply by saying nobody's actually nobody, your parents were related to Palpatine. It's like, are you kidding me? We have a giant universe of
That's pretty much the most somebody you could possibly be.
That's not nobody. Like, I feel like you should have let me know about that in The Last Jedi, maybe. But the problem I have with it is a criticism I often see lobbed at the Skywalker saga over the course of its nine film run. It's the fact that you have an entire universe full of different races, different planets, and factions, and yet it all seems to go back to the Skywalker family. Granted, retroactively, as we've established for this movie specifically, the entire nine film run of the Skywalker saga is now known as the Skywalker saga, but it wasn't until this moment. And that's the problem, because it
wasn't until like last year.
It's a fix done out of convenience for the sake of putting a nice bow on everything. And I get it. I understand cyclical storytelling. I understand going full circle and tying back to things that have happened before. But at this point, it's the third time we've touched on this kind of cyclical storytelling. I am ready to move on, and I would hope that the rest of the universe would be ready to move on, but I guess not.
So hard pass to Rey Palpatine from Nick. How about you, David?
I think it fits the genre. This is a fantasy genre, and whether you're reading something, like the Bible, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, who your daddy and mama are matters in those stories. So I agree, it is convenient, but it seems like it fits that type of genre where who your dad and who your mom are matters. This isn't the story of, even Luke, even though he seems like a farmer boy, a moisture evaporator farmer guy from nowhere. He is somebody. He's somebody's son. And even though we're all somebody's son or mom, but I mean, still, it matters who your dad and mom are in a fantasy style story. So I think it fits the genre.
But it feels like we're getting like this giant fantasy novel that is sprawling and epic, and then suddenly the ninth entry is just like this pulpy $1 book that you just find on a random shelf in a gas station. It's like, this is just all born out of convenience.
I agree with Nick on one thing. I do agree with you on one thing. It loses its importance because we don't really know anything about Palpatine's kid. We don't know anything
Until
about
that moment.
Yeah, about the guy and the girl, and then they made this kid. They made Rey. We don't know anything about
Doug
him.
Palpatine,
Doug
her father?
Palpatine.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't understand. We don't know anything about him, so there's no connection to the character. So it wasn't very impactful. I get why
Agreed.
they did it, but it wasn't an impactful scene.
It comes back to this kind of familiar debate when it comes to the Disney sequel trilogy now, is The Force Awakens came out, and as soon as that came out, it's like, oh man, that was a carbon copy of A New Hope. It's too similar. It's too same. And then The Last Jedi came out, and we're like, no, this is way too different. We're not ready for this. And now we're back to this. So where does this land? Is this in between, or is this back in the realm of the familiar?
I'd say it's definitely back in the realm in the familiar, because it feels very much like a direct one-to-one of Return of the Jedi, whereas Force Awakens felt like a slight reimagining of A New Hope, but mostly A New Hope. This just felt almost beat for beat like Return of the Jedi, coupled with fan service.
I'd agree. So, got to move on. Going on to the next bit, and before we do that, I have a gift for you. There it is. So I was going to hand this to you mainly because a Jedi's weapon needs a little more respect.
Oh, thank you. Do I get to?
Hey, man,
Obviously,
careful
that's
where
a
you
joke.
go.
Yeah, I
Take
know.
it easy, champ.
Because that happens in the film.
Jeez.
That
Yeah.
part made me laugh out loud because that was so directly commenting on that moment from The Last Jedi when Luke doesn't show his weapon much respect. And it was just plainly, it seemed like that entire scene on Octo
Yeah.
existed for one purpose, and that was for Luke Skywalker to apologize for literally every decision he made in the last movie.
Yeah, we know that Force Ghosts can grab things.
True. Also important, we can come back to that, but let me ask you, did that moment of him addressing the lightsaber issue, does that work?
No.
Or is that corny?
No, it's so corny. It's so lame.
It took me out of the movie.
Have the audacity to carry one plot line from the original, the previous movie. Like, have some gall. Have something to say. I love the idea that Luke was interested in foregoing the Jedi way in order to establish something new and something better. The thing that we saw with the prequel trilogy is that the Jedi Temple and the Jedi Order is clearly flawed with the way they go about. You're not allowed to feel things. You're not allowed to experience love. All of these things. That's a problem because humans are by nature programmed to experience those things. So to forego those seems like a problem. And then that's what Last Jedi wanted to establish and build off of. And yet here we are back at square one. The Jedi are infallible.
Canceled.
Yeah,
Canceled out.
they are canceled.
What do you think, David?
I think there's a seed of that in Last Jedi. I think there's a seed of Luke kind of changing his mind about, ending the Jedi and it must end. We see it when he talks to Yoda and Yoda summons a lightning bolt. And he's like, snap out of it, man. Like, relax, Luke is changing. It took a while, but I think
He did realize in that film that he was wrong.
Yeah, I think meeting Rey kind of changed his mind a little bit. Maybe it happened too quickly for you, Nick.
I don't think he had changed.
one.
He didn't realize he was wrong until Yoda was like, "Hey, come on, wake
right.
up."
And
Yeah.
I think that is what we're seeing now. That cycle coming together in Rise of Skywalker.
But they make such a big point that the dark side and the light side need to balance each other out. And what is that balance? What does it look like when we are at homeostasis? That's the faction I want to see. I don't want to see just the light. Give me an in-between because, quite frankly, life isn't black and white all the time. There is an in-between, unfortunately. And it's in that in-between that we often make the most mistakes, but also have our biggest triumphs.
We could probably talk about that lightsaber moment all day long, but we have to move on in the sake of time. So next topic, Snoke. Snoke got a backstory. If you were hoping for a backstory for Snoke, you got one. It was a short one, but you basically know all you need to know.
Yeah.
Palpatine made him. He was a clone who had the Force. What did you think of this?
I didn't really care. It was fine when he died in The Last Jedi. I was like, cool, that's something I did not expect to have happen. Let's see what happens next. And the fact that they gave him a backstory is also interesting to me.
I like that they didn't spend a ton of time on it.
Yeah,
it was like one sentence, and it was like, oh, okay, that's all I need to know.
All I need to see was that visual of us seeing him in the back to chamber or whatever being grown again. I'm like, cool, this actually tells me a lot in very little time. Well done.
Very cool. What do you think, David?
I thought it worked, but again, like a lot of the characters, we just don't get a lot of time with them. So again, it's like Snoke, we didn't get a lot of time with him in The Last Jedi, and I just don't care. I was really surprised. That was a shock when Rian Johnson decided to kill Snoke, even though I guess it didn't really matter because the Emperor was just growing him in a tank anyway. But still, I was like, wow, this got this really super big, powerful character that trained and guided Kylo. We didn't really get to know anything about him. So while it was nice to see him in the back to tank and see where he came from, the aside again was one of those issues. I'm like, they just didn't get a chance to resolve.
I don't think that was
story.
a back to tank. I
Or
didn't gather that was a
whatever
back
he's
to
being
tank.
grown in,
I think that was
yeah.
like a cloning vet
cloning
of some
vet,
kind.
yeah.
A question that I had was like, often with Snoke, when we first met him in The Force Awakens, was like, well, where's this guy been all this time? Like, how does someone like that, who has that kind of mastery of the dark side, scoot under the radar with a guy like Palpatine? Because if he was alive during the same time Palpatine was alive, Palpatine would not allow that.
Right.
Unless Palpatine made him. So that worked for me. I liked that explanation of it. That all makes sense. It was really tight. Even the way that the clone of Snoke, or whatever this created being, how he has the Force, has a connection to the Force. I have a theory on how that would happen. And it involves Baby Yoda, but you'll have to watch my video on Palpatine's Return Explained, which is coming out tonight. So you have
That
to
deep
check it
tease,
I wanna
deep
watch
tease.
that.
out. All right, next up, we have Rose Tico and her involvement in this film. To preface, the wonderful actress who I've met a few times, Kelly Marie Tran. She's a wonderful person, wonderful actress. I think she did a great job with what she was given. Harassed a little bit by some of the fandom.
Oh, a lot of it.
And it seemed as if her role, Rose Tico's role in this movie, was again in direct response to that criticism, because she has speaking lines, she has parts, but she doesn't actually have any agency. She doesn't go out and actually make really any big decisions that affect the plot in any real meaningful way. She's in the background. She's reacting to things that other people are dealing with. That's her only role in the film. Was that on purpose?
Absolutely.
You think so?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that it's important to remember is Kelly Marie Tran did not write the script for The Last Jedi, nor did she write any Star
Actors
Wars movie.
rarely do.
They just read the lines and they act.
And they do the best they can.
And so to almost kind of relegate her to a secondary role when she was featured so prominently, I get it if the story didn't call for it, but it really did make it feel like she was just a second-class citizen. She's a Biggs.
She was along for the ride.
She's a Biggs or a Wedge who just happened to be along for the ride. She didn't die, which was thankfully, like, I feel like that would have been the biggest slap in the face.
She's more than a Biggs, less than a Wedge.
Yeah, there we go. I like that. I like the way you put that.
Yeah.
I think it would have been cool if they gave her at least one kind of cool scene to have. You know, I mean,
A moment.
I
Well,
wanted to
'cause-
see them give her a moment where she does something just incredibly badass.
Well, that's the thing,
Everybody's
Rise
like,
of-
sorry, Rose. Like, we're sorry we gave you all that crap.
right, because Rise of Skywalker has Game of Thrones syndrome. The ensemble's just so big. You can't give everybody equal screen time, but you can give them one cool moment. Even, is it Maz Kanata, am I saying her name correctly? Lupita Nyong'o's character? Even she...
Female Yoda?
Female Yoda had that one cool scene, a transmission of her shooting some guys and then going somewhere, like, you know, she's just being a badass. But you don't get to see Rose do that here, and that's a shame.
Yeah, what happened to, like, whatever.
However, I will say, now that you've mentioned it,
Yeah.
there's not a huge role for Maz Kanata
Oh,
in
no,
this movie
but at
either.
least
She
in that-
also is
right.
kind of reacting to stuff, but she's still in it.
she has
Yeah.
a moment, though.
Sure, she does.
Just a moment.
But who
yeah.
is Carrie Russell's character name again?
Zouri Bliss.
Yeah.
Like, get rid of her little...
She's on this list. We'll bring her
Get
up
rid
in a
of her
second.
little cameo at the end, and then show Rose some love in that little montage that you had there.
Yeah, I agree. We could have had some moment for Kelly Marie Tran to shine, and I think it was a bummer that did not happen. However, we got to move on to the Knights of Ren.
Ugh.
One of the biggest things that I was hoping for in The Last Jedi, and I think this speaks to the directness of the way this film, Rise of Skywalker, addresses The Last Jedi and the criticisms that were leveled against it. Where were the Knights of Ren? We wanted to see the Knights of Ren. So we got some Knights of Ren in this movie, and I think that's why, is because they weren't in the last one, and that's something that fans kind of cried out for. What do you think? Why were they added?
They were just set dressing for the establishing shots on every new planet that they arrived at. No, I was super...
It's not inaccurate.
I was super disappointed because when I first saw Force Awakens, like most people, I was pretty stoked to see these Knights of Ren. I thought they looked so cool, so interesting. Their weapons varied. One looks like he's straight up carrying a Buster Sword from Final Fantasy, which is dope. And I thought we would actually see them in action here, even though they were MIA in The Last Jedi. And we did a little bit.
They were cannon fodder.
But man.
But I mean, so are stormtroopers, so there you go.
There has yet to be a duel / lightsaber combat scenario as interesting as the throne room in The Last Jedi. And I thought we were getting teed up for that moment at the end of The Rise of Skywalker.
So did I.
And wow, what a lame fight that was.
In comparison.
In comparison.
I think a lot of the lightsaber fighting was a little lackluster.
Kylo did have his moments, though, where he added character to the combat, which I appreciate, like him blocking while crouched over, and he's like taking a breath, like very calm, cool, and collected. It almost felt like I was being transported back to Kylo's training at the Jedi Temple, which I thought was really neat.
I like seeing him run around with a blaster, too.
Yeah, it was cool. It was like,
It's kind of clumsy, a little bit random, but still pretty cool.
it felt like I was living through a Star Wars, almost like Jedi Fallen Order moment, in that I was taking out some higher elite enemies.
Well, I think the Knights of Ren were an answer. That, I think, was a fan service answer, because like ever since we saw them in the trailer for the Force Awakens, we wanted to know more about them. We wanted to see them in action. We just never got that. So they tried to give us a little something, but it just wasn't enough. And the weapons, I don't get it. They don't seem practical.
Yeah.
They're huge. Why are they so big?
Here's the one reason why I appreciate the weapons, because all of most of these Sith Lords, they all have like a bunch of like kind of Sith dark side adjacent
Right.
like wannabe apprentice people
Emperor
who
has
aren't
his guard,
Sith,
yeah.
but they're kind of waiting
Right.
in the wings. Asajj Ventress, the Inquisitors, they're all good examples of this. But
Mm-hmm.
they all have lightsabers, so they just look like Sith.
Yeah.
Not so with the Knights of Ren. They carry clubs and
Yeah,
huge swords and stuff.
And
They're
I'm
just
hoping
weird
that's right.
weapons. It
Even in
works for me.
Rebels, they get the lightsabers that can work as helicopters too. Let's go one one. You know, it's
That
like how
makes
come we
so
don't-
much sense
We don't
to
see
me,
those.
but-
Where are those weapons at? Yeah, I don't know.
I do love those.
It just feels like they're Sith cosplayers to me. Not that there's a strike against cosplayers, but just that they are trying so hard to be something that they clearly are not.
and segueing
Sith
away
posers.
They really
Sith
are.
posers. That's kind
yeah.
of what they are. Yeah. Transitioning away from apprentices, let's talk about another apprentice in this movie who we got to see, Leia Organa. We find out again a very direct. One of the criticisms of The Last Jedi was the way that Leia survived being sucked out into the vacuum of space. How did she do that? How did she know to use the Force in that way? We got an answer to that as well, because she was fully trained as a Jedi, even got to the point where she created her own lightsaber. So that's how far down the road she went. That was never mentioned before, but it was very explicitly spelled out here. Again, is that an answer to criticism, or is that an interesting plot point?
That one I don't particularly have a problem with, because I think in Force Awakens, JJ makes a point to say she is a general, whereas in Last Jedi, we see her clearly experienced with the Force. So I always just saw that as like, hey, I just didn't feel the need to clarify that she was a Jedi. Like, I just assumed she was a Jedi, maybe barring like an arbitrary rank or title. Like, yeah, she's clearly Force sensitive, and she's pretty damn good at using the Force. That's just something I assumed.
I really think, I think it was an interesting plot point. I liked it. I liked how it was quick. Because my issue with the whole de-aging and CG face stuff, even in The Irishman, it looks off. Like, it just never looks quite right. But it was at night. It was a nighttime scene. It was a quick shot of both of their faces, establishing shots, and it was done. There was no conversation, no lips moving. Because for me, it's like playing a video game, even though as much as I love games, the eyes and the mouth.
That's what always sends it right into the
takes you
uncanny
out. When you're
valley.
watching a live action movie, it's not good. You know, if it's a game, it's one thing. So I'm glad
Even
they,
as good as they've gotten at it.
I think they did it for just the right amount of time.
I agree.
They didn't spend too much
Well,
time
like
on
compared to the Tarkin scene back in
Oh,
Rogue
no.
One, like
Which also worked for
And
me.
Carrie Fisher. And the Carrie Fisher scene
Yeah,
was just
Carrie
like,
Fisher.
it's too much.
It worked until he turned around. I think you should have just kept him in the reflection, but I digress. I really do like that scene that we saw of Leia's training, because it felt like going back to the Legends, or I guess the EU, or now that we know as Legends in
Right.
Star Wars canon, it felt like early days of post Return of the Jedi, and it just felt like I was back there. It felt like I was a kid again, watching what happens after Return of the Jedi in a way that didn't feel too like self-aggrandizing or like patting itself on the back. It was just, this was a thing that happened.
Totally, and it was something that was covered in the EU, back or Legends, whatever you want to call it. The reason that really worked for me is singular. Because of this whole storyline, we got a new lightsaber.
Hey.
So what that means
Sure.
is all the guys who make those lightsabers are all going to be jumping on their, however they design these things, and you're going to see that online like next week at the latest.
Well,
Same with the new Rey saber.
Yeah, you got a couple new
We got a
lightsaber
couple
designs.
new lightsabers out of this movie, so for that alone, this was all worth it. Okay, moving on. You mentioned Zouri Bliss, which is Kerry Russell's kind of Boba Fett-y masked
Right.
bounty hunter style character. My question about her. Okay, so Poe is given Zorii.
Right.
And
That's
it's
his
established
interest.
very clearly that they have some kind of romantic history. Was Zorii Bliss brought into this movie solely to give Poe Dameron a female love interest so he wouldn't have to end up with Finn?
Didn't we see at the end, again, we don't have the DVD out yet, so I can't, freeze frame it, but weren't there two women kissing in the celebration scene at the very end?
I don't remember
I thought
that.
I saw
That
somebody.
was a thing.
I thought I
That's- I
saw
mean,
it.
that's
So
cool,
there,
but
that
now,
is something that
it
happened.
wasn't one of the main characters.
Right.
But we did see two women kissing in in an effect, like a, I love you kind of way. So,
True.
yeah.
Cool.
But not a
Doesn't
main
an-
character.
doesn't
Not a
answer the
main
question.
character.
Doesn't
True.
answer
That's
the question.
true. That's
I
true.
don't think that specifically Zorii Bliss was brought in to counter like our Finn and Poe romantically involved. No, here's this person for Poe. I don't necessarily believe that, but I also don't think J.J. Abrams has the ability to tell LGBTQ romantic emotional relationship. I think he's good at portraying agape love between friends, but I think he lacks the nuance to tell something not even just like this type of he's just not good at telling love stories.
Fair enough.
Period.
And I'm not necessarily disagreeing with that, but I'll go back to the same question. Is Zouri Bliss the way to sidestep that shortcoming?
I got something else to say why I think she was introduced. Disney Plus. You
Disney
gotta
Plus.
realize anything in Disney Plus, all these little
It's definitely the wild card, isn't it?
they could do doing all these Loki miniseries. You got Cap and Falcon, Falcon and Bucky coming up. They could do a spin-off series on Disney Plus with those two. I think that's with Poe and Carrie.
It's been reported that Poe, along with the rest of the mostly the principal cast, are not going to be coming back, which I don't believe for a second.
Oh yeah, I mean
they're giving Rey a brand new lightsaber, and we're never going to
money
see her
talks.
use that.
Anything, never say never with Disney. Anything's
I
possible.
don't think so. I think we're going to see them again.
Yeah.
But anyway, moving on. Thank you for humoring me with that one.
Yeah.
Okay, last one. So yeah, straight up, last question. I've kind of posed this to you before, but after going over everything that we've gone over, once again, was the Rise of Skywalker made to right the ship, so as it were, from The Last Jedi? Is it made in direct response to that movie, or is it its own piece of art unto itself?
I think that it is unfortunately a product of trying to make everyone happy, and in doing so made no one happy, and is not soulless, but pretty close to something that would resemble soulless, because it just feels like it's trying so hard to make you feel warm and fuzzy. And I felt warm and fuzzy.
I did too.
But what were the stakes? What was the point? What was it trying to say?
Felt like I only understood that it was the end of the Skywalker saga because I've heard those words spoken so many times. This is the end of the Skywalker saga.
Thank
it
God.
really just felt like an episode.
Thank God it's the end of the Skywalker saga. Let's move on to something
I'm okay
new.
with moving on with that, especially after seeing something like The Mandalorian.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Like, okay, let's move on.
That's
Let's
taking
do
Star
something
Wars
else.
in a direction that I think we are all ready for it to go.
I think there's
in.
more at stake in this film than Mandalorian. Mandalorian's great. I enjoy it.
no, it's
Baby
smaller.
Yoda's super cute. But
I'm
hasn't been a
saying
whole
in
lot at
terms of
stake
moving
yet.
on to something else.
Oh,
It's okay
yeah,
for that,
that's
but
true,
the
yeah.
stakes in that show
Yeah.
obviously are much, much smaller than what we just saw in The Rise of Skywalker.
But I
Not
think there
trying to say
were,
that.
to go off what you guys were talking about, I think there were some really emotionally impactful scenes. I think the Rey Kylo stuff really worked.
So, yeah, agreed.
I love the Force healing, and then it wasn't like Romeo and Juliet, but just like the way that she was dead and then he woke. It had that. It was very poetic.
I guarantee
I enjoyed
you,
that.
I guarantee you, JJ
Was he going for a Romeo and
He
Juliet
was just
moment?
like, dude, this is our Romeo and
Yeah,
Juliet moment.
I don't know. For me, it got me.
When The Force
I felt
Awakens
it,
came
yeah.
out, and I don't necessarily say this in a negative connotation, this is truly how I still feel about this trilogy. It's kind of like Twilight with lightsabers.
Yikes.
Again, don't take that negatively. Again, but that's the same Romeo and Juliet kind of dynamic.
Well,
You're not from the same world. We're somehow trying to make this work, and they end up together, kind of.
unlike
Except
Twilight,
somebody
though,
ends up becoming one with the Force.
unlike Twilight, I don't believe any of the romantic beats in this, because there's only really two. One happened in Last Jedi, and then this.
Right.
We had the sexual tension between them in Last Jedi, being Force dyads and actually talking to each other, and not necessarily just talking, but being within proximity to each other in a way that feels far more intimate. And then that quickly evolved into this kiss. I needed more. I needed more of a. There needs to be a little bit more of an arc there.
That was a great take, Nick. Great takes, David. Thank you for joining me. But our hot takes aren't worth nearly as much as yours are. So make sure that you let us know what you thought of Rise of Skywalker down below in the comments. Was it a response to The Last Jedi? Was it doing its own thing? Did it work for you? Did it not? Let us know. And anyway, thank you for watching. And now that you're all caught up, check out Palpatine in 5 minutes. I really like that one. I made that one. I stuffed as many Palpatine memes as I possibly could into that thing. Anyway, you remember to follow and subscribe IGN wherever you like to watch.